they don't necessarily kick to contest, and so Capozzo should have some opportunity to run from deep, and they will be certainly keeping an eye on him because they know what he can do.
Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of the Fratelli D'Rugby podcast, where this week we will be discussing Italy versus France in what might be our final game of the Rugby World Cup, and it might be the last game of Kieran Crowley's reign as Italy head coach, but that is all still very much up in the air. Italy remain with a chance of qualifying for our first ever Rugby World Cup quarterfinals, albeit our hopes have been ever so slightly dented in the last few days. I'm joined as usual by Mike and Ottavio. Now, Ottavio, I spoke to you just the other day. Mike, so I'll just briefly come with you. How are you now? Have you recovered from Friday night's nightmare?
Yeah. It's tough couple of days, and the following day as well, I went to my missus' dad's 60th, and they're avid rugby fans, and having 4 brothers constantly ask me what was going wrong, one after the other, and then like the granddad and everyone. Mate, it was just a tough couple of days, but I'm excited for this weekend. I was saying to you boys literally just I felt I'm excited for Friday. I don't know why. I'm ready to be hurt again.
That is it. That is exactly it. Ready to be hurt again. And given that we are playing France, I thought about going to the French rugby expert that is Paul Eddison. Paul, thank you very much for joining us. How are you?
Very well, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to Friday as well, hoping not to be hurt.
Yes, well, that seems to be the theme, not getting hurt. Now, we will go straight into it, obviously Friday night. Italy needing to win to possibly qualify, and therefore we would be knocking New Zealand out. Is that correct? We'd be knocking New Zealand out, or is it the other way around?
No, France out. France are the ones who are... New Zealand, provided they get 5 points against Uruguay, are pretty much through. I think there is some incredible mathematical thing where if New Zealand get 5 points, then if Italy won by 150 points with both teams scoring 4 tries, there's a way that New Zealand could still go. But realistically, it's New Zealand through and then one of France or Italy.
Sure, and New Zealand play Uruguay on Thursday, so we'll pretty much know the score come Friday. So with that in mind, there is still absolutely everything for this Italian team to play for, Ottavio, but I think we're all still a little bit damaged from Friday, and our expectations and hopes are maybe slightly less so this week.
Yeah, let's say less because we already been beaten badly last weekend, but we are the supporters. We want to push them to do what we didn't see, like a good performance by our team against a team that we know better, because of course we know better. We play against them every year. We have players in top 14, Pro D2, so there is that different. They are more Latin than New Zealanders, so maybe always something can happen as usual, but I go with the performance as usual, and then the result can come. But let's play well as we played against France during the Six Nations, because that probably is one of the best game we had last year, this season. Even if we lose, but that was pretty good game for us. So hopefully we go in the same direction because we got some injuries, some calls up new, so something different for us. We're struggling more than being without DuPont, actually.
Yeah. So on that, the team news that's been released this morning, both teams will start with Italy. An all-new front row, Ceccarelli and Hammy Fiver coming in, and Ferrari as well, and also Niccolò Canoni for Dino Lamb. So they're the 4 changes in the pack, and then Pierre Bruno comes back on the wing, and Capozzo back to 15. and we're again going with that Tommy Allen, Paolo Garbisi 10-12 combination, which I think from a back's point of view works. Now, Paul, Capuozzo has sort of been trialled out on that wing position. Obviously, you've seen him quite a bit playing over in France as well. Is 15 where you think France are probably hoping that he didn't play and he's the most dangerous playing there?
It's a tricky one. Because I've been quite impressed with him on the wing for Toulouse. I think he's looked very good when he's played there. I don't think it's quite happened yet for him in an Italy jersey. And in theory, fullback is where you probably get the best of him with his kind of ability to counter-attack from deep and having more options each way. Obviously, for someone who can step so easily, that kind of will always kind of worry defenders. And Garbisi's at 12. I was lucky enough to speak to him a couple of weeks ago, and he spoke really well. And one thing I didn't get into the piece because I just didn't have space was he much prefers playing 12 for Italy than he does for Montpellier, even though it was at Montpellier that he started playing 12 more, because he still gets to play as that second ball player, whereas at Montpellier he's more of a kind of crash ball centre, which is obviously not at all suited to his skill set. So with ball in hand, I do quite like the Allen-Garbisi combination. I'm not sure it's necessarily the best setup defensively against a French team when you're going to have Jonathan Danty running down those channels, and you're not going to have the big, unless they, maybe without the ball, they try and flip it so that Brex comes in one and try and hide Garbisi a little bit. Not that he kind of shirks tackles, but he's just not a big bloke, and they're a big fly halves who struggle to deal with Danty, let alone someone who's maybe a little slighter. So I think that's going to be the concern for them. But yeah, France kick very deep. They don't necessarily kick to contest, and so Capuozzo should have some opportunity to run from deep, and they will be certainly keeping an eye on him because they know what he can do.
Absolutely, and that French team is essentially, other than at scrum half, it's pretty much full bore, isn't it? It's full whack. They're not resting anyone at all, are they? That's as strong as they can possibly go. Yeah.
That's barring the injuries. Obviously, Valencia and Tamac are out, and then Dupont and Marchand, who are still kind of coming back from injury. Marchand, they're not sure when he'll be back. Dupont, I guess they're crossing their fingers that he'll be back for a quarterfinal. But otherwise, it's full strength. I saw a few people on my Twitter suggesting, maybe they should have rested a couple. But I think after the Six Nations, there was no chance they were going to do that. They know how dangerous this can be, and they need to kind of absolutely go for it. And if they've talked about kind of flying out of the blocks in the first 20 minutes and not getting, I think the scary part as hosts of a World Cup with such high expectations is they don't want it to get to an hour in and be hanging in the balance, because that's when those nerves would really start to kick in.
And I guess, Mike, that is when notoriously maybe that the French crowd can get on their backs a little bit. It's known that, they're not always the most patient of supporters. So is that what we're kind of hoping for here? Let's try and frustrate and stick in the game as much as possible and cling around and ultimately do the exact opposite of what we did last Friday.
Yeah, I think we're notorious slow starters, and we can't afford teams like New Zealand or teams like France to be 2 or 3 tries, for them to be 2 or 3 tries ahead at like 20, 25 minutes. It just doesn't work like that in Test rugby in general. But against the best teams, that's, we start chasing the game, and, we know how we play. We try and play, an expansive game, which means that there's plenty of counter-attacking opportunities. And we saw how many were scored off first phase because we were trying to stretch the defence and they were just too good at the breakdown. So, yes, is the answer. We need to absolutely fight from minute one. We have to, try and slow the ball down as much as, people do to us. We have to try and be really proactive at the breakdown. And I think actually that's where, we should hopefully have been looking at this week. We've got Zuliani on the bench. I was actually genuinely hoping that we might have got him to start this week just to try and slow that ball down. But again, like you said, who knows? He can come on and he can change a game, 2 or 3 turnovers in the right area. Like you said, maybe some nerves start coming in, and Yeah, it's I hate the phrase, but it's any given Sunday, right? And just one added layer, I think this could potentially be Kieran Swanson, right? And the boys will want to try and go out on a bang for him. So if they manage to manage the emotions right early doors, and like you said, we're both Latin countries. If we manage to genuinely enhance and that emotion and utilize it for good, then who knows? Who knows what can happen?
No, Ottavio, is that what we're hoping for here? That sort of, we spoke about this the other day, the psychological, emotional element of the game. Is that maybe kind of a little bit more important this week than perhaps it was last week, given that ultimately we haven't got anything to lose, so it's a case of really, can we properly go out there and use that emotion and try and channel it into a game that can compete with France.
Look, the guys Barney and the rest of the team, they wrote their thoughts after the game and they burn it in fire. So let's burn in fire what happened last week, and I think yes, it's a great opportunity for the guys to show up what they are able to, winning or losing the game, but performing with the brand that they try to improve in the last couple of years. That is going to be the key, and the mental part. So I think it's been worked hard, but then you have to play better, because you can be always in the game. Make an example: Australia losing against Wales, for example. Now Nikataze was one of the best in the team, because you can see his attitude since last moment of the game to try to play to be better. Other guys, not sometimes we don't speak to each other in the after maybe they scored try number 10, but we have to stick together, because this group is going to be the next group with adding some players in, some old players maybe leaving, but this is going to be the group that is going to bring not only this last game but after. So it's going to be really important for them, and emotions are there. I think they are ready now, because the New Zealand scored 96 against us, so they don't want something else to be repeated like that. Maybe you're going to be 13 in the field sometimes, who knows, but they're going to answer back.
Sure. And Paul, do you think France will be expecting that sort of emotional response from last week, and given that it's Crowley's potential last game, is that something they'll have talked about and be ready for?
Yeah, they have spoken today actually about kind of expecting Italy to absolutely throw everything at them in those first 20 minutes, that they will be frustrated at what happened last week. And kind of they won't want to produce another performance like that, which, I mean, after the promise of those first two games, you can't go out on a damp squib like that. So they know that if they're not up for it in the opening 20 minutes, that's going to be an issue. What's interesting, I think, is if you look back to that Six Nations game, France actually made a very strong start in that game and had raced into a comfortable enough lead, and then their discipline. It was just as they were kind of introducing these new interpretations of how hard you can go at the breakdown and what you can do, and they were whistled off the park in, I think, 18 penalties. They just never got to grips with what was and wasn't allowed, and obviously Italy came back and led with 20 minutes to go. So I think it wasn't quite the same against Uruguay, but that was something that they got wrong against Uruguay as well. They conceded a lot of penalties in that area. So that's something they're going to be really hot on, I think, in trying to make sure that they don't give easy territory, easy points, especially with the way Tommy Allen's kicking at the moment. You can't afford to do that. So that's going to be something they're quite kind of focused on. But they know that, that start of the game is going to be huge. And if they get it right, then they'll be in a decent position. But if they don't come out of the blocks right on it, then they might find themselves in a bit of trouble.
And what do you actually see happening on Friday? How do you actually see that one going?
I think France will go after the set piece, particularly at scrum time. Obviously, that the second half, I guess it was asking a lot, wasn't it, with Fischetti going off early. It's not surprising that the kind of scrum was starting to struggle, but quite how much it struggled was a concern, I think, for Italy. And I know Ferrari has played loose head before and has done okay, but it's not an ideal scenario having him starting there. Federico Zanni is not someone I've necessarily been convinced by at scrum time in the past. And so I think having got the better of New Zealand, and that was kind of how they led at halftime in New Zealand, that's something that they'll really look to target. They will try at the breakdown, but I think they'll probably have to work out what Carl Dixon's going to want and what they can do and can't. And then I think they will try and kick for territory as they always do. They won't try to play too much in their own half. They will try to use their big runners to put pressure on. And then, I guess there's a big test of Luku. But Luku in this role is with the full team. It's with Jalibert, who he plays with week in, week out for Bordeaux. And that back row is still very strong. Olivon leading has got experience of that. So I think they'll look to keep it fairly tight, but then as ever, any opportunities that come their way, if the ball does go loose with Penaud, with Biel Biarré, who's coming in, with Ramos, with Fiku, they've got people who can really take advantage. So I think they'll, without taking too many chances, they'll look to try and kind of build a score as quickly as possible.
Ottavio, can you convince me that we can win?
Yeah, if we're gonna be clean in our lineout, because we struggle, because we start throwing on the tail of the lineout against New Zealand, and they were mass ball stolen by them. So it was something new that we tried, because in the previous two games we never throw the ball to the tail. So it's gonna be hard, because Woki and Antonio usually jump without the second jumper in front, so they always cover there. Woki is always gonna jump and Flamen is gonna call, so we have to be better there, and hopefully we're gonna keep doing this fake maul to aggregate them, because if not, do you remember what happened with Olivon against Varney last in the Six Nations, or with Flamand stopping Varney, and Varney is gonna play this game? That surprised me, because I was thinking Pajero was going to start, actually. I was believing that, but we have to be better in the basics. So line out, scrum is going to be hard, so let this ball go back fast, quick, and play out, because we are better when we play around than in this occasion, because we don't have a decent, let's say, loser by role like is Fischetti, and Nemer didn't perform well, so he's already out of the team, as it should be, because he didn't play well at all in the last two games. So yes, we can do it. Yes, we're gonna kick more behind Penaud, like France did. Maybe we're gonna see more kick by Nacho Brex too, to put pressure there. Capozzo can kick like we did against Uruguay a couple of times, with running on both sides. This time it's gonna be Bruno, on the other side Ioane. So yes, we can do something. Of course, we have to be careful, because Luku is gonna offer a lot of 50-22 kicks from the center rack. He can do a lot of good stuff. Jalibert is always a maverick against us. We remember last year when he came from the bench. But yes, we can. I believe that we can do it. It's going to be hard. It's going to be the perfect game. The game we didn't see against New Zealand. If we want to win this game, we have to be perfect there and keep all the points we can, because there is going to be some pressure on France. Maybe you go up to 2 penalties, is already 6-0. Okay, they're gonna come for maybe not kicking, because they have good kickers, but they're gonna start to play. Maybe they can fail something around the area. We can be good in our 22. So yes, we can do it, but it should be the perfect game from us.
Mike, are you not surprised, but were you maybe thinking that Pajuelo would have been given a go here, given that Varney? I mean, let's put it bluntly. Stephen Varney's got a big game to play on Friday, because if this is the last game of Crowley's reign, and Varney's obviously been Crowley's sort of number one at scrum half, but with a new man coming in, everyone's positions are sort of potentially could change. So is this a big game for Stephen on Friday night?
Yeah, obviously it's going to be a massive game for him. You know, Otto and Paul both mentioned, like what we expected from him last game and what happened, in the Six Nations. He'll want to put that behind him, and like he said, he burnt those thoughts away. So hopefully, that baptism of fire, he comes out as a fresh player and he can change things up a little bit. It also maybe suggests that we might be trying something slightly different with Varney. We know how great his box kicking is at Gloucester. We don't see that at all in the Italian team, and I feel like that's probably one of his highest core skills. So it'd be interesting to see if we utilise that at all. But yeah, it's going to be a massive game for him. He's a confidence player as well. I think he's a young player. People forget how young he is. So hopefully he starts strong and he can sort of take some confidence away early. And we know what he can do at his best. I look back at the autumn games just before this previous Six Nations, and we know what he can do at his absolute best. So fingers crossed, mate.
And Paul Patretta was probably someone you've seen a little bit of. I don't know how much you've seen of him at this competition, but we have, as a podcast, talked about him a fair amount, and I think we're all quite excited about him. And by all accounts, he's absolutely rapid, and we just haven't seen that yet. So, what have you made of him, and maybe what have we got to be excited for from someone who maybe watches him a bit more than others?
Yeah, he's an interesting one. It felt like he was plucked a little bit out of nowhere. He was one of, at Toulouse, it's quite hard to be the backup to Dupont. When they had Sébastien Bézi before, he was brilliant at that role, but he was also kind of a top, not far off being an international scrum half, had played a fair amount for France, but even he wanted more of an opportunity, and it's quite hard to attract someone who's willing to sit and be the number two to the best player in the world, and knowing that you're going to play limited minutes in all the big games. Patretta, I think, has done as well as anyone in that role. As you say, he kind of plays with tempo, and he's got quite a lot about him. I'm surprised he hasn't had a chance. I feel quite sorry for Stephen Varney, because I thought he was at under 20s level. I thought he was an excellent scrum half, looked well above a lot of his contemporaries across the different countries. But it feels like he's not necessarily had the opportunity to play regularly enough at club level, and has therefore just been kind of learning from a few tests here and there at international level. And it's not a realistic way to improve as a player if you're the only matches you're playing. I know he's playing more for Gloucester now, but it took a long time for him to get an opportunity with them. And if he's just turning up for 2 or 3 tests here and there, or Six Nations, it's quite hard. Patretta, we'll see. I'd still need to see a bit more before I'm convinced that he's going to be the kind of the long-term solution to the scrum half role for Italy. But I guess Gonzalo Cossali will know him well, and will have seen a lot of him. So we'll probably find out fairly quickly what he thinks, and whether he thinks he is kind of the man. Did I see? Is it Fusco's on the bench though? Isn't it for Friday?
Fusco from the bench.
Yeah, who I guess both he and Patretta have got a bit of versatility about them, but yeah, it seems a bit of an interesting one. I've been impressed with Fusco off the bench when he's played. I'm not sure if he's an out-and-out scrum half from minute one, but he definitely seems to be able to inject a spark. So if it is tight, I could see him being a useful person to bring in.
I think maybe a good place to sort of to finish on is Kieran Crowley. That this could be the last. We've got another podcast with Seb and Tommy Allen later on, but this could be one of the last times we talk about him. Is actually being the current head coach. Paul, I think everyone from a wider perspective outside of Italian rugby would look at this and think maybe what on earth, but at the same time, especially after New Zealand last week, some people are saying that maybe this is a good thing, and maybe 2 months ago we were questioning it, and now it might make a little bit more sense. What is your overall view on the Crowley situation?
I'm still quite surprised. I think I think Gonzalo Cossali is a really good coach, and I think if you're going to replace him, then I think that's a very good person to bring in. It felt like Crowley was building something. I saw a couple of comments about that Italy-New Zealand game showed why they're moving on, but I don't know, that felt more like an aberration. Like 20 minutes in, they just suddenly kind of shut up shop, basically. I'm like, okay, this isn't going to happen. And if you're not making first up tackles, there's no one worse than New Zealand who are just going to punish you over and over again. But I don't think that is really any justification for moving on. I think he's been building something really interesting. I think there's some foundations in place. There are obviously some areas where they need to kind of find solutions. Obviously, I guess once Riccioni's back at full strength and once you've got Lucchesi back, then that front five probably looks a little bit stronger than it does on Friday night. Obviously with Fischetti out as well at the moment. Scrum half is the big one, and then there's, I guess, working out exactly what the midfield is. Obviously, once Menoncello's back and Marin and people like that, so there's definitely the building blocks in place, and I think Quesada will do a very good job with that. But I think Crowley's been doing a really good job in building up this team, and kind of there's possibly a little bit of naivety at times with the game plan, but they're aware of it. They know that they can't afford to run from everywhere, and if teams are expecting it, that won't work all the time. But I don't see why they couldn't have evolved with him rather than with a change. He's also vastly experienced. Comes across as a genuinely nice guy, very approachable, open to kind of. He obviously understands the Italian game. I think it's a shame to see him go. I'm not sure what his next step will be. I don't know if that's been confirmed yet.
Going to Japan. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that does ring a bell actually. Now you mention it. I think it's a shame to lose him, if I'm honest. But Gonzalo Quesada's teams have played some very good rugby at Stade. He was, by the end, by all accounts, the man who basically was coaching the team in 2011 when France got to the World Cup final, and he was kind of the lead voice. I'd be excited about him coming in, but just a shame that it's at Crowley's expense, basically.
Absolutely. And actually, I'll just go on, Ottavio. Continue. Go on.
No, about Quesada, it's interesting because also those last 3 years that he was on charge of Stade Francais, he went through a lot of troubles with the team going in a direction, trying to pull and create the club culture with the Stade Francais, but still he managed to go to the playoff this year, basing everything not so on a great attacking game, but really efficient. Joris Segond was always kicking everywhere, and the defense was the key of this team, because I saw him when was there Paulo Dogu too, but you can see this like a ruthless team, ready to defend, ready to fight, and maybe not so many shape on shape attack, not crazy stuff, but really consistent stuff in attack. So maybe we're gonna see something like that with him more than flair.
Yeah, I think that's. I think he'd like to play with more flair, but I think he probably realised what he had, and as you say, Joris Segons is not that sort of fly half, and Leo Barre wasn't ready yet, and after that you probably kind of. I mean, Nico Sanchez is getting towards the end, so I think he realised what he could do, and he adapted to the squad at his disposal, which is what you want from a coach. I think you don't want someone who is so kind of has such tunnel vision that this is how I'm going to play and this is the only way to play. You have to kind of realise what you've got to play with, and I hope with Italy he will look at it and think, okay, well, this is a team that is suited to playing with a bit more freedom and playing a bit wider. Hopefully he can find a way to tighten up the set piece, which has obviously kind of not been firing quite as well, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah. Mike, I'm going to give you the final word.
Well, I did have one more question for Paul, if that's all right. So, based on what you're saying, I think this is a question that everyone seems to be asking, including at the 60th birthday party. What do you think we should expect from Quesada? Do you think we should be expecting like high percentage plays, slightly more conservative rugby? I say anglicised, but that's traditionally like how England would play, right? More sort of set piece based. And is that what we're going to expect from him? Do you think?
I imagine it'll be a little bit more conservative than the current game plan, but I wouldn't expect it to kind of veer into your Steve Borthwick, let's box kick, try and recover, and take no chances of playing anywhere. I think you look at his Jaguares teams that he had; they played a lot of very expensive rugby, and if he's got the players at his disposal, I think he will look to do that. I think it just depends on what he's working with. He will be keen to kind of certainly work on the set piece, but maybe also that as Stad he had someone like Paul Eddison, who's about as good a tight head scrummager as there is, and that kind of was able to give them the kind of the building blocks and go from there. But he was quite kind of not innovative, but he would make sure he used Sekou Makalu in quite an interesting way in kind of getting him out wide, and a bit like France do with Olivon, and then you see a little bit with kind of New Zealand used to do with their hookers, whether it was Coles or Taylor or whatever, using them out on the wing and taking advantage of the kind of the mismatches you can get there. So he's not going to be afraid to try some different things if he thinks they can work, but you probably won't see them running out of the 22 over and over again if it's not working, because that's as admirable as it is, it ends up costing you points more than it ends up earning you opportunities.
It's music to my ears to hear that, actually. Not running out of our 22 over and over and over again. It does my head in. Anyway, that's actually really interesting. I've kind of forgotten about that Quesada angle with French rugby and stuff, so thank you very much for that, Paul. Look, I'm conscious of the time. I just thought I'd ask everyone very quickly their prediction for Friday, just as a matter of course. So, Paul, what do you actually think, in terms of a score? What do you reckon for Friday?
I will go for France to win it 31-21.
Okay. Ottavio?
I like that. Anyway, I like that. So with the heart, I want to win in the last game of the last play of the match. But if we're gonna stay inside 15 points gap, it's gonna be good for us. Let's say that.
Mike?
Hard to predict different.
I think, Head is saying sort of 35-17, something like that. I'll stick with that for now. I'm not listening to the heart this week.
Yeah, I know. Well, we listened to the heart last week. We put it all on the line for our social media, saying we're going to win by a point, win by 2 points, and we looked like dickheads at the end of it, ultimately. But there we go. Fingers crossed that. I think all I'd like to say is just an emotional response, plenty of character, plenty of grit, and ultimately I'll be a lot happier than I was last weekend, because at times it just didn't look really like we were giving it everything we possibly could. So I'd like to see more of that, and I think, anything between 15-20 points would be a small win, but got to try and be as competitive for as long as we can. So I'll go France by 17, and there we go. Thank you, Paul, very much for joining us. You have a good weekend.
You too.
Thank you very much, boys. Ultimately, I hope it's not that great, and Italy win. But there we go. Ottavio, Mike, I will speak to you both in a couple of hours. That's it from this episode. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel on whatever you listen to your podcasts on, and also make sure you follow us on all of our social medias, which will be tagged on this video as well. But for now, it's goodbye from all of us here, and speak to you again soon.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao.